Okay, I think we're all good to go now. We're sharing in the group.
Great.
So just want to say hi to anyone who's joining in today. And a big welcome to Sarah Thornton, who's joined us. So thanks, Sarah, for joining us. Sarah cast off the lines to her legal career not long after being awarded Australian Corporate Lawyer of the Year in 2016. These days, she's something of a vagabond, choosing to live on a sailboat with her husband, Dean, writing novels, enjoying everything this big blue planet has to offer, and chasing an endless summer. Her debut, Lapse, was shortlisted for the Australia Crime Writers Association Ned Kelly Awards and received a a Stars Kirkus review. The follow-up White Throat was released in December 2020 and continues the crime-busting adventures of the fierce and feisty former lawyer Clementine Jones. So I've had the pleasure of reading White Throat. For people, I know a lot of people ask this. It is book number 2, I think, in your series, but I had no problem reading it without reading the first one. So I know a lot of people ask that. Thanks so much for joining us. It sounds like you're leading a very interesting life. Would you like to maybe tell us a little bit about yourself or about your books?
Yeah, sure. And thank you, Jackie, for inviting me. And yeah, I'm pleased that you were able to read White Throat as a standalone
Mm,
novel without feeling the need that you had to have read the first one. That was certainly my goal um, uh, in doing the sequel. In fact, I actually, in order to kind of make that happen, I read one of Candice Fox's books, the
okay.
second in a series,
Yeah.
like remember the Crimson Lake series. So I
Mm,
read Redemption Point, which is book 2, before I read Crimson Lake, solely for the purpose to kind of work out how does she do it? How do you
mm,
kind of have this series with the same character, but um, you don't have to, it doesn't rely on reading the first book. So I'm really glad that worked. Probably have to thank Candice for that. Um, yeah, look, my story, 2014 it was, when I got the bug to write. I thought I would, well, I had been wanting to write for a long time and I'd been attending workshops and seminars, but hadn't
mm,
actually written anything, but I always thought I would. I would write a novel at some point. And I was sitting in the Brisbane Writers Festival. It was August 2014, and I had this kind of like a enlightenment moment where I just had this strong feeling that um, I really needed to change the course of my life, which at that
mm,
time I
mm,
was a corporate lawyer
mm.
in a very big company with a lot of staff working for me,
And
and
obviously a
yeah,
very successful lawyer as well. It sounds like, yeah.
well, I was very humbled to win that award, and
Mm,
but yeah, but I kind of got this overwhelming sense of the creative life. You know, I was steeped in this corporate life,
mm,
and I was listening to a woman, and she was speaking about an author, about her sea voyage and how she'd written a book about it. And I was just kind of overwhelmed with this idea. Well, I'm married to this sailor guy. He's a
mm,
really good sailor. I could live on a boat and
mm.
write novels. We could rent the house out and live off the rent. You know, that doesn't work, by the way. We kind of live off our savings half the time.
Mm,
But yeah, that's how that came about. And within 4 years, the two of us had made that a reality. And now we've been living on our boat for almost 3 years.
mm,
Um, and loving it. And the whole project for me is kind of, well, I have to have a project. I can't just kind of float around
mm.
enjoying myself. I really need, really need to get my teeth into something.
Mm,
So that's the genesis of these novels. They're both driven very much by the lead character, who's a bit of a powerhouse, Clementine Jones. She's a disgraced lawyer.
mm,
Um, and she's kind of running from a catastrophic incident in her past that has left her shattered, full of guilt and shame about what she's actually done. In White Throat, it's fairly clear what she's done, whereas in Lapse, you kind of get to know a little bit more about it as the novel goes on. But it's kind of like this journey where she's exiled herself from her whole former life, and in Lapse, she's that's the first novel. She's living in a little country town in Victoria. And she ends up, she's kind of like this sort of person who can't just sit around doing nothing. So even though she's kind of fled everything she knows and her life is in a shambles, she picks up little jobs, and in Victoria, she coaches a footy team. But in White Throat, we find her, it's the off season, and she's gone to Queensland to house sit. She's trying to get away again from her past. What has happened has become public knowledge, and she's trying to escape that notoriety, still full of this kind of unspeakable shame as to what she's done. Again, though, she can't just sit around walking the dog and looking after the house. So she offers her legal services pro bono to the local environmentalists who are campaigning to save the habitat of an endangered turtle, which forms the title of the book, The White-Throated Snapping Turtle. In doing so, she gets involved. There's a violent death, which impacts her greatly for various reasons, which you find out in the opening chapters of the book. The police put it down to suicide, and she believes they've completely misinterpreted. She believes, this woman didn't fall off the cliff. She was pushed. And it becomes her kind of quest, really, to find out the truth and expose the killer, all the while trying to get the police interested, she doesn't actually want to have this thing. This should be what the cops are doing. But she's never able to pull enough together to kind of interest them until towards the end. And so that's kind of the setup for White Throat. She goes through the book with her mate, Matthew Torrance, who's kind of a sidekick, and he has his own little storyline going on as well, which becomes quite explosive, and the two sort of plot threads come together.
So he's in the first book as well.
Yes, he is. He is, and their relationship is kind of they're just friends. He's a lot younger than her, but they're kind of oddballs, both trying to start out a fresh life, and they're always symbiotic in the way they support each other and kind of dovetail. He's this kind of standover man who's been in prison and so on, and she's this kind of straight girl from the corporate law fraternity who now kind of sees her life as reasonably worthless after what she's done. And so she kind of does a lot of reckless things, and you can imagine it's not a book where you have it's not a police procedural. There's no detective or police who are driving the investigation. So in doing that, she really has to resort to some kind of outrageous things to get information and to find her way into the town and the key players and who might know something about this death, So you have this kind of series of encounters where she's trying to get information, sometimes not quite legal methods.
And how much of you is in here, or experiences you might have had, or?
Yeah, look, the joy of writing fiction is you get to create these characters who are totally fictional, but then they're always drawing on the blend of people that you meet in your lifetime. You meet a myriad of diversity of people, and you kind of get the joy of imagining a character as a completely made up character, but drawing on all that experience. But for me, yeah, obviously she's a former corporate lawyer, as am I. And the reason I wanted that was because when I started writing, I I was very much the novice, and I wanted to write someone who had a thought pattern that I could at least represent plausibly. You know, that someone who I would be able to plumb the depths of their kind of decisions they make, the choices they make, the language they use, and all that sort of thing. And I wanted that to be really realistic. So I chose someone of the same profession. But beyond that, I'm not a disgraced former lawyer. I'm just a legal dropout, really, living on a boat. Yeah. So, but the one thing I did want with Clementine was I really wanted her to be a leader. And I mean, you know, like I read so many great crime novels with female protagonists who are kind of weak. Even great novels like Girl on a Train, Woman in the Window, these sort of domestic noir almost or similar. But the woman is kind of, she's not involved in her society in any way. She's making zero contribution. She usually has some sort of substance addiction. And I kind of wanted someone who's out there and doing stuff and part of the community and in laps that there's football in it, but it's not really about the football. It's about the community and how the community comes together and what she does for the community. And again, in Whitethroat, there's a woman who appears very early on, Helen Wesley, who's based on a character, well, her inspired by a woman by the name of Helen Caldecott, who was an anti-nuclear, anti-arms race back in the 70s and 80s, back in the day when we had the Cold War and we had the threat of nuclear war every day. And, you know, I read her biography many years ago as someone when at a time when I really needed, I don't know, some direction, and I was kind of going through a bad time myself, and I read all these biographies, and hers was one, and I was really inspired by her life. And so Helen Wesley is kind of in that mode, completely fictional, but there she is. She's running the wildlife campaign for this turtle and all the other endangered wildlife, and she's really making a difference and trying her hardest to contribute. So, yeah, so that's kind of a bit of the background to some of the main characters. And yeah, then they're definitely not me. For instance, Clementine eats avocado. I have this really weird avocado allergy, and I deliberately wrote in that she's making this guacamole so that I could show all my friends who know about my allergy. She is not me, okay? Not me. She is eating avocado. Yeah.
No, that's fun. We've got a few people watching, which is great. Just reminding people watching, if you've got any questions, please type them in comments. I do have one question from Belinda. She said, living on a boat sounds adventurous. Do you have a favourite place to birth?
Yeah, well, we do. We just kind of cruise. We don't really berth anywhere permanently. We kind of visit all these amazing places. So we're in a river at the moment because we've got some jobs to do on the boat and stuff like that. But just out from here, we're in Bundaberg, kind of not south, the top end of southeast Queensland. Just north of here is a day sail to a place called Lady Musgrave Island. And here's a plug for my Facebook page, Sarah Thornton Books. If you want to see what a tropical Great Barrier Reef Island is like over the course of a week, living in a boat on anchor in this beautiful tropical lagoon surrounded by coral and turtles everywhere, you know, that's one of the places that I really love is Lady Musgrave Island. It's kind of the southern tip of the Great Barrier Reef, and we're just planning a trip for this cruising season, which is the dry season, if you like, so across the middle of the year when there's no cyclones. For this season, we want to kind of explore the Great Barrier Reef from the bottom right up to the top.
Nice.
Yeah, so we had a year in Tasmania, and which was absolutely adorable. Yeah, so no particular fixed address.
So, will we see any of your books written about people living on a boat?
Well, Whitethroat has boats in it, as you know, Jackie, having read it. It's still set on the land, but there are boats coming into the action, and there's a hell of a lot of action. In Whitethroat, kind of white knuckle sort of stuff. And the boats feature in that. I do have an idea for Clementine Jones that does involve a tropical island, and I haven't actually started on it yet, but I'm looking forward to writing it, especially having just been to Lady Musgrave.
So are you currently writing something at the moment?
Yes, I am. I'm actually writing a different protagonist at the moment, but another crime thriller. And that one is actually the main character does live on a boat, with stationary, like permanently in the Brisbane River. So like a little community of people living on boats in the Brisbane River, and this kind of marginalised community. Which exists. We just spent a few months down there over the cyclone season. So that's what I'm working on at the minute. What did I write today? I was doing some writing. Wrote a scene today. Oh, she's a journalist. She's trying to get information out of someone. Yeah. It's fun.
And will this one end up being a series as well, would you think?
I'm not sure. Look, I can't wait to get back to Clementine Jones. I did want to write something different just to test myself, push myself, but I really can't wait to get back to Clementine Jones. I've been waiting a while. But just see, I don't know. It all depends on what people think, and my agent and my publisher and all of that.
Yeah.
But I'm having fun writing it.
Yeah, I bet you are, yeah. I'm interested to know, like, you were a very successful lawyer and then you decide that you want to quit all that and live on a boat and become a writer. What did people say to you when you told them that?
Well, I kept it secret from work. No one at work knew, because it just didn't fit. And I wonder if any of the listeners have had this situation where your hopes and dreams and ambitions do not coincide with the environment you're in. So in a corporate environment, and I was in-house, I wasn't in a law firm, I was general counsel for a large company. In a situation like that, you're expected to be ambitious and want to go to the next step, work for a bigger company and do all this. I felt like I'd kind of achieved everything I wanted to achieve in law. And I had this dream of writing and living on a boat. So I told no one, because I just didn't think anyone would really have any respect for that as a future, if you like. But when we told our friends, they thought it was great, because my husband is an absolute adventurer, action man, a little bit of a Steve Irwin style character. And, his boating skills are amazing. I love boating. We've always done adventurous things. And so everyone kind of thought, yeah, that'd be great. Do it. Except my mother.
Okay.
Not so keen.
Okay.
But a lot of my friends and family have kind of come on board and enjoyed the experience too. So that's been wonderful to be able
great.
to share it. Yeah.
And being a writer, had you ever thought previously, like growing up or later in life, that you would want to be a writer?
Yeah, look, I wasn't so clear cut on that goal specifically, because writing wasn't a real job when I grew up. I came from a family where you kind of studied hard and you got a job that had some sort of professional status about it or something. I did want to be a teacher at one stage, that sort of thing. but I had a love of words. I really loved words, so much so I remember as a teenager I used to listen to Parliament on the radio.
Oh, okay.
13, listening to this stuff.
Mm,
I didn't understand the politics. I just loved the debate and the
mm,
argument and the way they manipulated words and kind of maneuvered words around to shape their argument. And maybe if Court was on the radio, I might have enjoyed the same sort of thing.
mm,
But I used to read dictionaries, just read them,
mm.
including a medical dictionary.
Oh, wow.
It's great.
Mm.
Yeah, it's great for Latin. Like, I never did Latin, but I kind of understand a little bit about Latin. But yeah, so I had this kind of love of words, and law, I always say, is a profession that is uses words to untangle society's most difficult knots.
Mm,
And that's exactly what it is. It's words, the way the law is written, the way facts unfold. It's creating a narrative around the facts to sort of slot in with whatever the law is. And you become a master of words. I think if you're not, you're probably not that good a lawyer. I was more the written word. I wasn't a litigator, so I wasn't in court. So, but many lawyers are really great verbally, on their feet, of course. So yeah, that was kind of what got me, and I loved the concept of it, and I kind of thought, as I was saying earlier, I'd been going for years to writers' festivals and doing seminars and workshops because I had by that stage realised, well, I really want to write a novel, and hell, when I'm retired, what am I going to do? I can't just. This is one thing where I'm a bit like Clementine Jones. I'm easily bored, and I've got to have projects. So that was kind of my grand plan, and it seems to be working.
Yeah. And could you tell us how hard or easy it was to get that first book published?
Look, I had this dream ride. I almost feel guilty talking about it, but at one of these workshops that I went to, a fellow by the name of Michael Collins took this workshop that I was at. Michael is a Booker Prize shortlisted author, like a really amazing author. He really loved the first 20 pages of Lapse, the first book, when it was in manuscript form. And he actually, out of the generosity of his heart, offered to read it, the whole thing, and give me feedback. So I got this kind of, amazing mentorship, if you like. And by the time, for the fourth draft, I'd written 3 drafts, by the way, so it was pretty well advanced. The fourth draft, Michael helped me with pointers. And then the fourth draft went to to a few agents, and I got picked up straight away within a couple of weeks of putting it out there. My agent, Gabby Naher, gave me all these wonderful insights into how I could further improve the manuscript. One of the great things of having a good agent is that they really, some of the stuff she told me seemed, as soon as she said it, I would think, oh, of course, why didn't I think of that? But you're kind of a novice. And here's a professional looking at it and knowing where the issues were. So Gabby then, once I did that 5th draft, pretty quick, I'm quick editor, I shifted a few things around. I think she asked me to drop 10,000 words and add this scene and add that scene in the same breath, I turned around pretty quick, and she had it. She loved the changes I'd made, and she had it out to publishers. And I had a 2-book deal within a few weeks of signing with Gabby, or about 6 weeks. I think the publisher takes a little while to read. And they signed me up for 2 books, Lapse, the one I'd already written, and White Throat, which all it was a 1-page synopsis. That's all they had for that.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
And they loved it. So
yeah, no, that's really great, because it obviously doesn't happen like that for everybody.
No, it doesn't. And I should say I have written a 3rd manuscript, which that's already done. It's not actually crime, and I'm going through the battle of trying to get a publisher for that, which is much tougher for me. So I'm starting to experience what normal people. Yeah, I had that dream run, but now, it's tough. It's not easy. Yeah.
And Belinda's wondering how you chose your characters' names.
It's funny because in Whitethroat, everyone's got a nickname. She has a. There's one guy with a double-barreled surname, so he, of course, becomes the hyphen. There's another guy who is the president of the local Residents Progress Association, so he's Ralph, the resident president. But how do I choose them? So I had great difficulty with Clementine Jones because I picked a name that turned out to be a Marvel Comics superhero. And I didn't know. I didn't know because I don't get into that sort of stuff. And then I kind of thought, I better check this. And I found it, and I got really attached to the name. And so then I had to go through the throes of thinking of another name. And like Clementine Jones just has this beautiful lilt to it, and I can shorten it to Clem. And so I guess it's a bit like picking baby names. You're looking for that rhythm. It's also the era, Ralph Bennett. He's going to be a child of World War II or just post World War II with a name like Ralph. I remember in Laps, there's a couple a power couple in this little town, Katinga in Victoria, where Laps is set. And their surname was Hood, Hood, all through the drafts. And then once I got to a certain point, and I thought, gee, it makes them sound like bikies or something, the Hoods, And so I changed it. And the day I changed it happened to be the 50th anniversary of the drowning of Prime Minister Harold Holt. So guess what their surname is? Holt.
Yeah.
Yeah. So look, there's funny things that kind of crop up that spur you on to pick a name. I try not to use names of people that I know, except for fairly common names. I mean, obviously, I know a lot of Scots. I think I had Scott. There's a Scott in Whitethroat. His first name is Scott. I try to avoid people I know, but I think that's going to come to an end because the book I'm writing at the moment, I just want to use the name Christopher. Now, my brother is Chris. That's too bad. He's just going to have to like it or nothing.
Well, the more you write, you sort of need to use some names that you know, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. You can't just keep coming up with exotic names.
Yeah, exactly. And how much research do you do for your books?
Well, for Whitethroat, I knew that I would be writing Whitethroat fully while we were on board. I had actually completed Laps before we moved on board.
Okay.
But Whitethroat, I'd signed a contract and we moved on board that year. And I knew that I would start writing it as soon as we moved on board. And so I wanted to pick a place where we were going to be very early in our first journeys. And so that was the Great Sandy Straits, which is the beautiful waterways between Fraser Island, World Heritage National Park, Sand Island, biggest in the world, the straits between that and mainland of Queensland, south of Hervey Bay, north of, Sunshine Coast. So I thought, right, that's my setting. She's going to be house sitting up there in this little town. And then I had to research, because I wanted an endangered species, and the turtle, the white-throated snapping turtle, is an endangered freshwater turtle that actually exists. And yes, it can breathe out of its bum underwater. But I researched endangered species in that area because I wanted that to be part of the theme of the book. So there's a fair amount of research there. But once I've kind of got the gist of it, the research comes as I go. So, we'd already left the Great Sandy Straits, and 2/3 through the book, Clementine's driving down this road. which all the towns are fictional in the book, but they're kind of they could be real towns.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
like all the distances between Maryborough, for instance, and the little country town of Poona. That was kind of my model. Well, okay, if Poona is my fictional town of Piama, then so she's driving along that road, and I'm thinking, what's that road like, you know? And I get on Google Earth and go, so you can really see everything about that road, and it's really straight. It's got pine plantation. So she's driving along there with the pine plantation, and then it turns into kind of paperbark forest. And I actually went back there. I actually went on a bit of a writer's retreat in a camper van, and I went down through. This is after I'd finished the first draft, probably the second draft, and I went down through there, and I drove that road. And, you know, I was so exhilarated because I felt like I'd really captured it. But that was just from Google Earth, you know. So,
okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and to be perfectly honest, there's a little bit of a lazy streak in me, which is why I don't write cops and detectives as my main character. Because if you do that, you have to really know police procedure.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to get straight into the writing, you know. I kind of was giving up a big life to do it, and I didn't want to have to start from scratch with all this research. So that's kind of why I have what in the trade is called an amateur sleuth in crime fiction circles, a protagonist who is not a detective or a police person.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's interesting why you chose all that.
Yeah.
Could you tell us what you like reading yourself, and maybe if there's something you've been reading lately that you could recommend to us?
Yeah, sure. Well, I really like Michael Robotham.
Yeah,
and I've just
he's
started reading his very first book, The Suspect, because I kind of like that feel of reading the first book of a really established author. How did they go about this kind of bestseller? And I find his writing is a really high quality, as is, you know, Lee Child. I love the Jack Reacher books, and in some ways I kind of think of Clementine Jones as kind of a wandering Australian female Jack Reacher, you know.
Yeah.
She could go anywhere, and she just picks up her stuff and goes house sitting or whatever it is. She's got no real ties to anywhere anymore. I like reading. You know, quality crime is great. But I also like. I grew up on a diet of literary fiction, and I have an English literature degree. I wasn't always a lawyer. And I did arts at university, majoring in English literature and history. And so with that, back then they didn't have creative writing. It was just critiquing great works of literature, basically the whole 3 years. So I was a bit of a book snob. I actually had a little rule that back in the day, this is the 80s, I guess, I would never read a book that had an embossed title. You know, the gold or silver with the raised lettering. I would never read, no, because it had to be horribly commercial. And of course, these days it's much more common, and some really good books have embossed titles.
Yeah.
But being a bit of a book snob as I was, I turned up my nose at all that. So I read a lot of literary fiction. I loved some of the modern stuff, or, you know, post World War II stuff, like Saul Bellow. I loved Dostoevsky, and I actually used to like Charles Dickens and Jane Austen, but these days I can't read them. I just find it's just too waffly, and it's just the narrative is so complicated, and I can't get my head around it these days. I think it's maybe the digital age. You know, we have to have short and punchy.
Yeah.
And, you know, so at the moment I'm reading from around the top. We'd love to sail around the top of Cape York and across to Darwin. But I'm also reading, I've got a Peter Carey book, so there you go, another literary one. But I'm also reading, as I said, The Suspect from Michael Robotham, which has started really well.
Yeah, he does have some good ones. Thanks for those recommendations. And I think a lot of people will be wondering, what's it like? How have you found your life now that you're living on a boat?
Well, look, it's totally different, of course, as you would expect. Maybe to paint a picture, the first major problem I came up against in living on a boat, and of course everything is different. But the biggest problem I thought would be 24/7 in a very small confined area with my husband. You know, that's kind of unnatural. You usually get some space on your own. You got your job or whatever it is you're doing outside of the home. And so that was a fear that we wouldn't be able to handle that. That wasn't a problem at all, which is quite a relief. However, what I learned straight up, even in that first week we'd moved on board, we had this plan. We were going to go here and then here, and we're going to have a couple of days there, and this is a really nice anchorage, and then we'll go over there and check out this anchorage. And I'd studied all the cruising guide and looked it all up. And then what happened was the weather. And we couldn't go to that place or that. We had to change it. We had to go there or somewhere else first, or we couldn't go there at all because the weather wasn't right to go that direction. And that threw me into a tailspin. I was used to being in control of pretty much everything that, you know, a planner. I'm a bit of a planner. My husband is spontaneous. He doesn't care if he doesn't know what's happening in the next minute, let alone the next week, you know. So I had to kind of adapt and kind of grow a little bit of a spontaneous spirit to kind of go with the flow and get a feel for it. And what really helped with that was I started, instead of just looking at the books and seeing where we could go, I started looking at the weather forecasts. And so I took an interest in that. In fact, kind of became the main person to look at, well, the forecast is going to be this, so we'll be able to go here, or we won't be able to go there, or whatever it is. So I kind of started taking over that area, which gave me a kind of understanding, and that brought a sort of peace. People say, oh, you must be a control freak. You can't be a control freak on a boat. But it gave me the understanding, laid the platform for me to get with that flow of boat life and journeying, cruising around in a boat. So, but look, it's not easy. You know, there's no dishwasher here. You know, there's boat toilets. Have you ever been on a little boat? Well, it's not a little boat, but you know, boat toilets, they're not the greatest. You know, you can't have, well, lots of people do, but you can't necessarily have lots of bottles of wine on board. You know, you quite often end up with cask wine because it's lighter and less space, and certainly financially is completely different. I live my life as a corporate lawyer. I put all my sort of energy into my job, and so when it came to money management, no, we just spent whatever we wanted. And then on a boat, you know, we don't have the cash flow anymore. So that was, you know, I find myself not wasting things. I'm far more frugal. So all sorts of things are different on a boat. And I kind of like it. But I'll just add one more point to that, because I think it's a nice way to think of it. One of the greatest pleasures on a boat on a sailboat is the fact of sailing. It's a beautiful thing when that motor is switched off, the engine noise, suddenly there's peace. And people think, oh, all you can hear is the wind in the sails. No, you don't hear the wind in the sails. If the sails are set right, you don't hear the sails. What you hear is the rush of the water under the hulls. And it's just this beautiful sensation that we really have a fairly small footprint on the planet. Most of our power is solar. We have a little bit of gas for hot water and stuff like that, but it's pretty much solar powered, and very little use of the motor. So it's a really nice sort of freeing sensation.
Yeah.
Yeah, privileged. I mean, who gets to buy a boat and live that life? I get it. I get the sense of privilege with that. But on the other hand, we're not particularly, we're not necessarily rich with, we have to be very careful with the rental income that comes in and make sure we can eat. We live off fish. We don't buy meat. Yeah. All sorts of things on a boat that are different.
Yeah, no, that's a great insight. Thanks. And what about do you have a special place that you write?
Right here. So I am sitting in what's called the saloon. So I'm trying to show everybody. So there's my laptop there.
Okay.
So, and that's the hatches. So you look over the back of my head, that's looking towards the bow of the boat. So and if I went this way, you'd be looking out the back of the boat. But I just sit here at this saloon table mostly with my laptop. In fact, it was one of the reasons we chose this particular boat was because it had such a nice, comfortable, upright seat and table with a PowerPoint right there. My husband's an electrician, so that wouldn't have mattered anyway, but it felt right. I also have a little stand-up desk. So this is a catamaran. So if you go down into the hull, starboard hull, the shelf is quite high, and for me at my 5 foot nothing, I can stand there and have like a stand-up desk with the porthole behind it. Quite groovy.
Nice, yeah.
But yeah, I handwrite most of my first draft.
You do? Oh, wow.
Yeah, so first draft I can sit anywhere on the boat with. I have a notepad with a hard back, so I can just go anywhere to write that. But most of the time I'm just sitting here. Look, here in Bundaberg, I've been up to the library. Like I'll go to libraries where if we're in a port, I'll track down the local library and ensconce myself in that lovely air conditioning and sit there for some hours. And
No, well, thanks for that. It's been great insight into some of your life, and yeah, I've loved chatting to you today. Can you tell people how they can keep in touch with you? I think you said some of your photos of what you're doing on your Facebook page.
Yeah, so I'm I have, my Facebook is the most, the one I attend to most. So that's Sarah_Thornton_books, Sarah Thornton Books. And that, look, occasionally you'll get writing stuff on there, but probably most of the time you'll get sailing and boating life on there. But yeah, so Sarah Thornton Books is the best one. I do have Instagram, but I'm just not very good at it. So if you want to keep in touch with that and find out what's happening with the next book or what's happened with White Throat or whatever, yeah, that's a good one to follow. I love having people. I write little stories, so they're like little they're photos that I've taken, and the captions, it's actually a story.
Oh, okay.
And so every now and then I'll actually post, a whole slab of photos, and you could read the whole story. Occasionally I have a little prize, so if you actually do read the captions, you can actually win a prize, like a free book or something. Occasionally I've done that.
Yeah, okay. All right, thanks so much. And thanks everyone who joined in, and thanks for the questions we got.
Yeah, thank you everyone, and thank you, Jackie. It's been a great pleasure.
Yeah, bye everybody.
Bye.